What's going on, Sheepdog Nation? Welcome to another episode of the Sheepdog Nation with your host, me, Autumn Schmidt. Today, I'm very excited to bring to you an interview from a fellow officer. He is a law enforcement officer of 16 years, I do believe, from Florida. I love my Floridians. I think I want to be down there versus up in Maine, i.e. Antarctica, where it is always cold. He is a podcast host for Firearms Nation. I was just going to say Sheepdog Nation. No, Firearms Nation. He has his own podcast, so you're going to have to go check that out. The link will be down below. This was an amazing podcast. His name is Arik Levy. Go check him out. Listen, he's got some really good things to say about guns, firearms, tactics. I think you'll like this interview.
Welcome to Sheepdog Nation Podcast, the only place on the internet where law enforcement and their families can come to be understood, supported, and stood up for. Here's your host, the always entertaining, down-to-earth, yet in-your-face truth speaker and Leo herself, Autumn Schmidt.
Sheepdog, before we get going on today's podcast episode, I wanted to ask you something. Are you interested in getting promoted? Or maybe not right now, but you know that it's coming up in the near future. Well, I created something for you. I created a free training with the top 5 skills every police officer must have in order for them to get promoted. And so I wanted to share that with you really quickly. If it's something that you want to do, it's a free training. It's an audio. So it's essentially just like this podcast, and it is accompanied with a checklist so that you can literally print it out, put it in your duty bag, and you can start building these skills right here, right now. That's going to get you promoted very quickly. If it's something you're interested in, go down, hit the show notes, click the link below, and get your training. Enjoy the show.
First of all, I just want to say thank you to having me on. It's always a pleasure to meet fellow podcasters, and
Absolutely.
especially podcasters who are in law enforcement. That's few and far between.
Yes.
But I'm a 16-year veteran. I work for a very large department in Broward County. And one of the things that I did in my career was I was in training. And one of that training time span, I was a firearms instructor. And when I left, I still have that desire to teach people to train. And I still do it on the side. But I'm like, all these contacts that I've made, wouldn't it be great to just talk to them and be able to pick their brains and, for free on the air and share that with people. And that's what I did. And it was about 2 years ago, a little bit more than 2 years ago, at SHOT Show. You're familiar with SHOT Show?
Yep.
Okay, I was at SHOT Show. I launched it, and it's taken off ever since. It's been very positive. And from that, I was able to do these shooter summits, and we could talk about those later. But the gist of it, the way I wanted to do a podcast, and I wanted to do it right, was that for me, listening to it when I was working, I always appreciated, really interesting interviews. And so that was, I said, I gotta be able to establish myself by asking good questions. So that's what I did. But yeah, so that's my deal. I'm still in law enforcement. I'm a detective now. I always wanted to be one, so it's great. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great career. I don't recommend people get into it, but it's a great career.
It's so true, right? I always tell my husband, I said, our kids are going to be firemen. If they want to be first responders, they're going to go work for the FD. They can work 2 days a week, and then that's it.
I don't think people understand that, because I see the people coming in, the kids, and I feel old to say that, but you know what I mean? They're coming in this job, and they have these expectations of what it's like, and I really think they're getting it from TV and movies.
Absolutely.
What being a cop is, and now, and it's so different now, with body worn cameras. And when I sound like an old guy, get off my lawn. But, when I started, most people didn't have cell phone cameras. The cell phones that we had were the Nextel kind. Remember those? You've seen one in a museum once?
Yeah. I seen one in the museum, but yeah, go ahead.
No, so that was the thing, is like, nobody had, now everybody, you get out of the car, everyone's got a camera. Mm-hmm. That was like the first thing they said in the academy. I'm sure they said something similar to you, is you always got to act as if you're on camera. And nowadays you really do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, so that'd be interesting. I'd love to hear a little bit of what it was like to work patrol when you first started
Well,
16 years ago.
16 years ago, it was, like I said, things were different. Ideas were different. Not that crime isn't crime. Crime is still the same. There's no doubt about it. And I think crime is a little bit different in one way, and I see it now in my current job, is that you got that social media aspect, that people are recording themselves doing crime. People are stalking people over social. They're harassing people, and or using that as a method to get people together to do crime. I mean, so there's a very big, the generation coming up, they know so much about all this technology. They're going to do well at that aspect. But interacting with the criminal, that's something that you really got to learn and cut your teeth with by being on the street. You can't do it behind a keyboard.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Even 8 years ago when I started, I always tell I always tell these stories like these, my war stories, just 8 years ago. And I'm like, listen, we used to do real police work back then. Okay. Like we used to. And so I can imagine 16 years ago, like, I don't know. I talked to a lot of veteran cops and they're like, yeah, well, we kicked down doors and we didn't give a shit. And, if the bad guy, they went to jail and that was it. And like, we did what we had to do. And I'm like, damn, man, like, let's get back into those days.
I understand. And I think it has a direct correlation. And this also comes from just being in training. There's they always talked about the big L, liability, even way back when. And then to fix that, you had to make sure that, you know how to write a report and document what you did. Remember, if you don't write it, it didn't happen.
Right.
Well, now with so much video, you have to be able to know exactly what you're doing. And I think that's where people get in trouble. They're not sure of, do I make an arrest? Do I put my hands on this person? And that's where I think people, for a safety aspect, that's horrible because, you shouldn't be thinking that, if you give these a criminal a second, they're going to take it.
Absolutely.
So that's probably where I think it's changed a lot is because, I mean, there's nothing wrong with body-worn cameras. There's not.
No.
I think they do more good than, a lot of people were resistant, but there's nothing wrong with it. You just do your job. But you got to get out of the mentality of like, what, that like I'm watching myself do the job. So I'm not paying attention to the bad guy. That's where I think people can get hurt.
No, absolutely. I also think that I don't think there's anything wrong with us wearing the body cams, but what I do think I have a problem with is I have a problem with the pressures that the command staff put on our officers. I know agencies, I worked for one that their fucking pastime was watching body cams and looking for reasons to jam people up. I mean, listen, I got jammed up because I was sitting in my cruiser on Christmas Eve and my shift was getting off at 11 p, right? It's 10:30. So now I'm like, okay, it's Christmas Eve. I want to go the fuck home. At 10:45, we get a call. It's a 10-person fight in the middle of the road. I'm in my cruiser. Nobody's around me. And I say, what the fuck? And I got written up for that because I swore. And it was recording and I was on my way to a call. I'm like, come on, really? Really? Find something else to do. So that's how I feel about that. And I mean, I agree. I do agree, though. I mean, if you are being ethical, then, being on body camera all the time isn't that big of a deal. I mean, I was a lot, but at the same time, like, we need to keep, in my opinion, I'm going to keep the command staff in their place. Don't try to jam your cops up. Be leaders, have our backs. And I get it. I know they have political pressures and stuff like that. But that's the way that it is. And if they would get off cops' backs, then probably we'd have a lot less issues. But don't comment on that. You don't need to.
Well, I'm just going to say in terms of body cameras that what I've seen is that it's helped a lot more than it's hurt. I think that back when I started, I remember a very specific case where this woman came in and made an allegation against the cop, and it was very serious.
Mm-hmm.
felony,
Yeah.
sexual abuse type
Yeah.
of uh, allegation.
Yeah.
And then it comes down to you have to find forensic evidence, and then you're going to have to take testimonies.
Yeah. Well, like in situations like that, I'm with you fully, 100%. And I've heard of a lot of situations where it has definitely gotten is exactly what you're saying. But I'm just saying in my, like if we look at it, if we flip the coin and we look at it in the other way, in the other direction, you know, obviously causes a ton of stress for cops, so they do absolutely they need to be deployed, the way that they're meant to be. And that's exactly what you're saying is in that way, that is it. Yeah.
Well, I
It,
think it's only going to get not worse, but technology is just happening so fast, and the things that they're going to be implementing into law enforcement, it's mind-boggling, some of the stuff I've seen. And yeah, the biggest challenge is going to be, what is the officer how are they going to interact with the public?
mhm.
If they get bogged down with all this technology, like I said before, they still need to know how to survive. They still need to know DT. They still need to know how to shoot, and then all the things that lead up to that. You're escalating or de-escalating. Are you able to do that? Do you have the common sense to talk to people? That
Mhm.
was only, I came late into law enforcement. I was already in my 30s, so it was a second career.
Mhm.
And I always had question, if you're an 18-year-old kid and you're going to a domestic, I mean, how do you talk to the grown-ups in the room who are having an argument? And you're 18 years old, and they could be your parents. I mean, so that always was a very weird thing to me for law enforcement. It's like, you obviously need a wide range of people because they got to have a career.
Mhm.
But yeah, 18-year-old, I just think was just a little too young.
Yeah, I definitely think 18 was too young. I came on I became a cop when I was 20, but I got on patrol when I was 21. And I will tell you that I definitely had to fake it till I made it. I had definitely had to fake that shit. And I had to just all of a sudden grow up when I'd go to a DV like that. And I'm like, oh, and have these talks. I really didn't even know what I was talking about, but I was just trying to go with it. And I couldn't agree more, because like you're right, like how do you relate? And so the only thing I would do is I'd like take it to like one of my relationships that I've had that wasn't a marriage, and I would just try to relate that way. But you're absolutely right. And that's another thing. No, let me ask you this. So like, have you like prior to you being a police officer, like were you wicked into firearms?
It's funny. I was always fascinated by detective stuff, criminal stuff. I was a writer, and so I would do tons of research. I had a lot of friends who were cops, so I was always around the law enforcement field and the firearms field. But even as a cop for the first 8 years, I wouldn't say that my shooting skill was that good.
No.
I mean, listen, most agencies, unfortunately, their training, it's qualifications and then maybe a little in-service, and that's it for the year. And if you can take a class, an elective, if it's offered, that's great. If you can go to another agency, that's great, or even go to a professional trainer, but that's few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
So the amount of time an officer is handling their firearm is very low. And you compare it, like my comparison to competitive shooters, they're basically touching their gun every day.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing dry fire every day. They're going to the range once a week, twice a week, and then they're competing under stress. So their skill set is really high.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I always preach was that, cops got to do more dry fire. Cops got to invest more. The one thing that's the most important thing on your belt is your firearm.
Absolutely.
And I know some people who are just terrified of pulling that gun out. Going to qualify is an ordeal for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more, and I relate fully to that. Now, let me ask you this. So is that the one thing, like I was going to ask you, like, what is the one thing that you would tell, an officer listening to this? Like, is it the dry firing? Is it pulling out and practicing holstering and reholstering? Like, what would you say for them that they should do every day?
I think that it depends on the officer. All right. The young bucks, as I call them, the guys that are, fresh out of the academy, maybe they have a little military behind them. Maybe they don't, and they wish they did. But, all guys think that they're really good at three things. And
Oh boy.
right. And the reality is they're not. So shooting is one of these things where going to the range and doing slow fire bullseye practice isn't really shooting, right? We don't shoot bullseyes. We don't shoot at a slow pace. When since you're cursing, I'll curse too. When the shit hits the fan, it happens so fast. And then when you look at all these traffic stop gone bad videos, it happens so fast. There was that one, I think it was in California, and she stopped that illegal alien.
Yep.
It was a week or two ago.
Yeah.
And she walked to one side and she walked up to the driver's side and bam, he shot at her. And by the grace of God, she didn't get hit. And then she unloaded, which, she did what she had to do. But it happens so fast. So you're only kidding yourself if you go to, an indoor range, put up one of those big B-27 targets and aim for the center, and you're shooting really slow and trying to practice your sights and your grip, all that stuff. You can't even be thinking about that. So, the only way you're going to get better is through tons of repetition. You've done jujitsu. And same thing. If you're ever rolling with somebody, you're not thinking about what moves to do and what you're reacting to it. You're flowing with it. And that's how shooting should be. You need to be able to have all that stuff done weeks and months and years before. So when you get up to even qualify, you're just there. You're not even thinking about it. But like I said, people don't. People
I love that.
Far away from that firearm on their hip. And when they come to qualify, I've seen people have like breakdowns. They're so nervous about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I really love how you use that analogy because, anybody listening to this who trains jujitsu or even a boxer or whatever you do for martial arts, like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like when when you're rolling or something, you're not thinking. You're just not. You're reacting. You're absolutely right. And it's second nature and it better be. Otherwise you're struggling. I mean, and then you're right about the firearms. And so, okay, so they should be dry firing, or reholstering and or unholstering. And like you said, I really liked your answer too. You're like, well, it kind of depends on the officer and I like that too, but I'm going to tell everybody you should be doing both right now. Just do it. Just practice. Just do it. Something. Yeah.
With the officers, right? So that's the young guys. And then there's people who are maybe towards the end of their career, 16 years to 20 years, who learned one style of shooting years ago and never learned anything else. Doesn't really work for them. They got to be willing to learn. They got to be willing to say, I'm still young at this. I want to get better. And I've seen that in some people. I've seen some people very resistant, but I've seen some people are like, you know what? Okay, I can do it. I can do 10 minutes a day. I can put a paper plate on the wall and draw to it, and develop that natural index. So I don't have to think about it, that my sights are there. I don't have to worry about, lining up my sights and gripping this, find a good person to learn from. That's the other thing, whether you watch this, when I started, there wasn't YouTube, but now there's YouTube. There's so many good instructors out there, but obviously make sure it's a good instructor. But there's so many good instructors out there. You can look at this stuff. There's forums, there's Facebook. There's so much media out there with good shooters. And then here's the other thing, and this is very, very hard for a lot of cops. Go and compete. Find a IDPA or USPSA. Go and compete. These are civilians and law enforcement military guys who want to win. And so they put the time in. And you can go in your duty gear for both of those. They'll let you go in your duty gear. So you learn what it's like to do stuff under pressure. All the special operations community bring these competitive shooters, the top guys, in to teach them because they shoot fast and they shoot accurate, which is what we want. So if it's good enough for them, I mean, my God, it's got to be good enough for us.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, that's really good advice. I like that. So let me ask you this. Can you, because I don't think what we said, can you tell everybody really quickly or tell them again what your podcast is?
It's the Firearms Nation podcast.
The Firearms Nation podcast. That's
right.
awesome.
And I talk to all sorts of people. I talk to a lot of competitive shooters because obviously I compete. I talk to a lot of military guys, other cops, and I also talk to some journalists and authors. There's as the more I did this, the more I learned to not embrace firearms. I'm not one of these guys that has so many guns. No, not at all. I don't have that many guns at all.
Mm-hmm.
I like the shooting aspect. I think it's a very interesting art, martial art, because we got to do everything super fast. It's not like golf, but it's the same ignition, right? Pulling the trigger or hitting the ball, it's that same ignition where it has to be done perfectly. But we're doing all this. We're running around. We're shooting. We're worried about our lives. We're worried about the lives of our partner or some other innocent person. But we should do things perfectly. So that's where it's such an interesting thing, and that's why I learned it. And whether it's it's a rifle or a shotgun, but mostly handgun, because handgun is the hardest thing to shoot.
Do you think that?
Oh my! Well, I don't just think it. I know it. It's because listen, shotgun and a rifle both have a shoulder stock, so you have another point of contact. Whereas the gun, you're holding it out in the middle of nowhere. You got to provide all the support, and that's why and it's a light gun, but it's got a heavy trigger.
Yes. So
versus you have a rifle, which is a heavy gun and got a light trigger. Here you got something completely opposite, and some of the triggers aren't the best, and we tend to jerk it and match. There's this. I know a lot up north. They have these heavy triggers in this one really big city that I lived in before, where 9/11 happened, and there's a classic video. They were taking down this murder suspect in front of the Empire State Building. They shot him. Can't tell you how many times, or shot at him. And
they didn't actually shoot him.
And they also hit like 9 other people because they were shooting one-handed. I mean, so here we are, we're shooting, it's hard enough to shoot two-handed. They're shooting one-handed. So again, you got to get good at it.
Yeah.
Especially now.
I couldn't agree more, especially now. What do you guys carry? What do you carry?
We can carry 4 different manufacturers, either Glock, SIG 320, M&P, or the HK VP9. So as long as they're a 9mm, and I know a lot of people can internet debate 45 or 9 all day long.
Yeah.
Nobody debates the 40. Sorry, nobody debates the 40.
I know.
I'm not a fan of the 40, but I like the 9. I think it works, and you carry more ammo. What could be better? Because think about it. You're in a gunfight. And it's a true story. Jacksonville police officer who I had on my podcast, one of the things he mentioned is that the bad guy went to relock or a slide lock first. So he was still shooting at him when the guy had to reload. And that made all the difference. I like being able to carry a lot of rounds, right? We don't know what we're going to run into. What do you guys carry?
Well, I carry a Glock 40.
Of course you do.
Yes, of course I do. I have to be honest. I'm pretty biased about a Glock. I don't disagree with you what you're saying. In fact, like we all carry extra mags, like more than department issued. You know what I'm saying? But I really like a Glock. What's your favorite gun?
Oh, well, I used to shoot for Team SIG, and so I still shoot a SIG.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I like the SIG 320. I think it's got the best trigger out of the box, and it just feels good in the hand. And you can.
What about the reliability?
That's a whole other internet debate.
It is.
It's a very reliable gun unless you drop it before on the negative 17-degree angle, which never happens. But regardless, they did the right thing, and they replaced all those guns, which I'm sure it cost them a lot of money, but they did the right thing. They didn't, run away from it. So it's been, I've shot tens of thousands of rounds through my SIGs, and not a problem.
Not a problem. This is a little fun nerd fact that SIG is actually manufactured like 45 minutes from my house.
Absolutely. And you know what that means is that, you're in Maine or you're in Maine?
But I'm in southern Maine, so I'm right near the border.
The Sig Sauer Academy is right across the border too. And if you ever want fantastic training, in fact, I should put you in touch with Hannah, because she's a fantastic lady, and she'd be perfect. She used to be a New Hampshire cop.
No kidding.
Yep. And now she's like some huge director, and she's just, I can't speak enough about her. She's terrific. So offline, I'll get you her information. You could probably do an in-person interview, and maybe
That would be cool.
Academy.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, I'm a pretty big Glock girl, but that's because that's what I started with. You know what I mean? I'm not an expert like you. I just shoot what I have and I love it. Like, it's, for me, it's reliable. It's like stupid proof. And in the academy, when we were doing all those like stress drills where they'd like take apart your gun and then like smoke you and then make you like within seconds like put it back together and then go shoot, and you had to shoot perfectly. For me, I could put it back together really quickly and it made sense.
And see, that's a perfect drill that anybody could do, even at home. Obviously, if you're doing any types of dry fire, you have to triple check that there's no ammo in the gun or even in the room, I like to say.
Yes.
And make sure whatever you're pointing at, that wall, there's nothing on the other side.
Right.
But do a little CrossFit routine, and then pick up the gun and aim it at a target and pull the trigger, the best possible trigger pull, and make sure you're controlling your breathing and all that stuff. I mean, you can do that dry and then do the CrossFit routine again, and then
do it again.
Jump up and do it. There you go. And maybe put multiple targets, whatever you can do.
Mm-hmm.
But at least you're doing something with it. At least you're incorporating it. And that's the problem, is that if you don't take your gun out and touch it and work with it every day, when you do that once a year at quals, of course, it feels weird in your hand. This is something weird in my hand, versus it's natural for me to have it in my hand.
Okay, so tell me, what would be your biggest advice for like a rookie or any police officer? Tell me what your biggest advice. I know we talked about like the dry fire and stuff, but do you have like any advice that you would give them? Like, what would you tell like an officer on the street when it comes to firearms? Like, what would you tell them?
Well, I would say always assume somebody has one. That would be my biggest advice to a rookie or to anybody. Just assume somebody has one and act accordingly. Right? So when you approach somebody, how are you approaching them? Are you watching their hands? Do they have anything that looks like it could be a firearm on them? If depending on, obviously if you're in, Main Street USA and you're stopping grandma, okay. I mean, you're not going to pat her down for your officer safety,
right?
At, 11 o'clock in the morning when she's leaving church.
Oh, no.
But if you're in an area where it's a high crime area, a drug area, and you're out with somebody, as long as you're following what the laws are, absolutely make sure that you're not out with someone with a gun. I see people are very afraid to, not illegally, but, just within the reason, like, hey, do you have anything on you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a gun on you? We're in the dark in this alley, you're out here by yourself. If you have any problems with me, patting you down, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid to do that, because too often, a lot of people carry guns. This is the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with it. I'm pro Second Amendment, but there's a lot of illegal guns out there, and that's what scares me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice. Absolutely great advice. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise. Definitely not my area of expertise, so it's nice to have somebody come on. And I'll forgive you for really loving SIGs and not Glocks. Just kidding. Just teasing. And but so anything else that you'd like to leave Sheepdog Nation with? Remind us where we can find you.
So Sheepdog Nation, just head on over to Firearms Nation. And you can search in, any Apple directory or any podcast directory. You can go to firearmsnation.com. The episodes are up there too.
Okay.
If you go to shootersummit.com, that's more of a masterclass on different, on shooting. Like the first one was very varied, but the last one was very specific on shooting and becoming a top competitive shooter. And there's a YouTube channel. I post videos on dry fire. I do gear reviews.
Is the YouTube channel Firearms Nation?
Everything is Firearms Nation.
Well, that's easy.
That is easy. You can find me on social media. You can stop by, say hi, tell me I'm full of crap. I don't care. But no, I especially, and this too. I love the law enforcement community so much. I think we are great brothers and sisters. And, it was always a mission when I was in training to make sure everybody went home alive. I think, anytime there's a cop death, it's a horrible thing because people don't understand that. People don't understand that we're getting up there to go do good and to help people, and we don't come home at night, and that's just a tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
I think people have just become so cynical or just so nasty about it that they say all these crazy things on Twitter and Facebook about the deaths of cop, but it's unacceptable. I want 0 cops dead 1 year.
Yep, absolutely. That's definitely, and my goal is that I want 0 cops committing suicide 1 year.
Yep.
So, I'm with you. I'm with you. We're tackling the same issue, just different angles. So
it's wicked good.
It's wicked good. He's making fun of my main accent, everybody. Sheepdog Nation, thank you so much for being here. And we're going to be putting the Firearms Nation stuff. We'll be right in the show notes. So you guys can just click down below, go see what's up over there. And we will see you next time, Sheepdog Nation.
And that was another episode of Sheepdog Nation. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes and let us know by giving us a rating. If you have questions that you want answered by Autumn in the podcast, submit it by going to the link in the show notes. As always, stay safe and watch your six.